Hello and welcome. Locating the homes of potential Muslim terrorists is at the heart of a controversy in Los Angeles, California. The LA Police Department has now dropped its plan to map Islamic neighborhoods as an anti-terror security measure, which it described as part of a larger community policing effort. But Muslim groups in Southern California are still worried about the fallout. Mapping worked for decades, where it involved police literally charting out neighborhoods that were victim to higher crime rates, allowing local law enforcement to better target their resources and expand community policing programs. But when the LAPD announced it would now map Muslim communities, divisions started to emerge over what was seen as a departure from tradition and a move towards ethnic profiling. On this program, we'll speak with the head of the LAPD's Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit and a representative of the Muslim community to find out where things stand and if mapping is really dead. Don't forget, we take your questions and comments on this program via email and mobile text. Well, joining me from Los Angeles, California is Salam Al-Marayati, Executive Director of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, a non-profit organization which works to enhance the political and civic participation of American Muslims. And here in Washington, I'm joined by Los Angeles Police Department Deputy Chief Mike Downing, who commands the LAPD's Counter-Terrorism Criminal Intelligence Bureau. Gentlemen, good to have you both here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You. And Mr. Downing, I'll start with you. I know there's been a lot of misunderstanding about this, and we'll get into the details of that. But let me ask you, what's been done to repair the damage from the fallout that this caused?
Well, I think the relationships that we've had prior to all of this coming to the news front certainly has helped with that. And as I stated many times, that this has been 18 months of dialogue and work, and this was an evolution into furthering that dialogue. But in the beginning, from the very beginning, this was always very open and transparent. It was not to be done without the cooperation and participation of the Muslim communities.
But sir, was there, was any thought given to the risk when you're using a word like, we're going to have a look at the Muslim communities? Immediately, you're starting to talk about a community that could be a mixture of nationalities and different backgrounds.
Correct.
Not just say Arab Americans, for example. Yeah. That it could cause that kind of fallout.
Yeah, I think mapping was the bad word. I think that was a hot button word that probably should not have been used. Well, we know now that should not have been used in the initiative. But the idea behind it was to help us better understand the diverse Muslim communities in Los Angeles, deepen the engagement and focus the engagement on the communities that were isolated, that were detached from society, if there are any. I don't know. I don't know if anybody really knows now in Los Angeles. And not to profile religiously or ethnically in any manner.
Let me bring in Salam Al-Marayati and ask that, you put out a statement stating that the Muslim Public Affairs Council did not, quote, embrace the program of mapping in concept as was initially indicated by the Deputy Chief in the LA Times. Now, what sort of, where has this left the relationship between the police department and the Muslim community?
Well, as Mike said, we had a good level of dialogue between us, and so that misunderstanding was clarified. And we had a meeting with the Chief of Police, William Bratton, and Deputy Chief Mike Downing with 25 Muslim American leaders. And at that meeting, the Muslim American leaders stood shoulder to shoulder, united against any kind of profiling, any kind of treatment as a suspect community. And the Chief said, hey, listen, nothing is going to happen without you. Nothing is going to happen to you. It's going to happen with you. And I think that reminds us of the words of Abraham Lincoln, that this is a government for the people, by the people. So I think that was a very good restart of the dialogue. And now it's time to rebuild the trust with the Muslim American community here that felt very hurt by what it viewed as profiling.
I have to ask you to answer an email that we got in from Samir in Maryland here in the USA. Salam, and this says, mapping Muslims? You don't need to tell me, they already do. There is no justice anymore. Of course, they're a person who's not so confident about the way things are. And I ask, well, what was the overall response of the Muslim community to that proposal in the first instance?
Well, there was a lot of hysteria and fear and concern, of course. People think that mosques are now handing over databases to law enforcement, and they're very scared. And I think that is exactly the wrong direction of any kind of program. And so now it's time to rebuild that trust among the Muslim American community. And yes, they do think that everything they do is already monitored, that meetings they have, that discussions they have in private are being monitored, if not by local law enforcement, by the FBI or by DHS. So there still is a lot of concern and mistrust in the community, and I think it's our job as a civil society to work with the government and the community to be that bridge of cooperation and of building mutual trust.
Well, let me get an email here to you, Deputy Chief Downing, and this one came in from Kenneth in Washington, here in the USA too. And it says, this is an example of where things worked out. The plan got scrapped and now community and police are working together. But how can we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, I think the intention of this was always to do this in an open, transparent manner in partnership with the Muslim communities. And I can't make that point strong enough that nothing was, as Salam said, nothing was going to be done to the communities. It was going to be done with the communities, for the communities. And the idea here is this was a process, and really the process that we were engaged in was almost more important than the result of the process that we were going to end up with in the beginning anyway, because it's communities that defeat crime and it's communities that defeat terrorism. And this was a case of the police being in a position to be the catalyst to infuse services and support and engagement in the dialogue.
So I want to put another email question that came in from Texas in the USA, and Kayla says, mapping Muslims is profiling and it's wrong. It's wrong when it happens to African Americans and Latinos, and it's just wrong when it happens to faith groups. If I wanted to be stereotyped, I'd move back to the old country. I'm not quite sure which old country Kayla's referring to. But you were looking for, in the statement you made to the Senate committee back in October, you were looking for communities and enclaves based on risk factors that are likely to become isolated. So when you were thinking risk factors, what was in your mind?
Well, in thinking risk factors, and by the way, mapping of individuals is wrong because it is profiling, but mapping of communities or segments in the initial thought was to identify those communities that were isolated, that were removed from government services based on language barriers or cultural barriers, who were afraid to be policed by services. It was just to try to identify those enclaves because we believe that they might be more at risk. And if we have the opportunity to identify them and deepen the dialogue and build trust, then we're protecting the community. And that was the whole essence of the initiative.
Salam al-Mariyati, of course, it's been identified that there are risk factors. However they are handled, there is something that has to be dealt with here within the community to stop extremism and radicalism setting in and taking hold. So how would you propose handling those risk factors which the Deputy Chief has just described?
Well, I think the way the Muslim American community has handled them, as Mike said, the Muslim American community is well integrated. 99.9% of our community is socially and economically successful and accepted. And I think part of the problem with the Senate hearings is that its assumption is exactly the opposite. It's as if 99.9% of the community is not integrated. In fact, that Senate committee that talks about risk factors and radicalization has yet to invite a Muslim American organization representative to testify at the hearing. So even the Senate committee is really not even close to understanding our community. The way we deal with it, the way our community has dealt with it, is we deal with it through education, through programs, through the sermons in the mosques. That is the only way to stem and prevent any kind of radicalization in our community. It is not a law enforcement problem, it is a social issue. And in some cases, it's a matter of theological understanding so that our youth are not confused about the rhetoric of extremism. And therefore, it is Muslim Americans that are already on the front lines against extremism. In fact, one big reason why we haven't had another 9/11 is because of the patriotism of Muslim Americans. And the Muslim American community is the most patriotic community in America. And I have yet to see a political figure engage with the Muslim American community to demonstrate that kind of work the Muslim American community has already completed.
Let me put an email to you that came in from Derek in Virginia here. And Derek says, Mr. Al-Mariyati, why do you believe mapping is wrong? Wouldn't you like to know if there is a person out there who might want to inflict harm in your community or any other? I would, for my safety and the safety of others. And based on what you just said about how the community works, how much, I mean, apart from the education factors and so on, how much self-policing is there to really help root out any radicals?
Well, first of all, mapping is not going to find those individuals. It's impractical. If Muslim Americans are highly integrated, then it's impossible to really map out communities. It's not only immoral, but it is also impractical. That's number one. Number two, the way we deal with these issues is the way every community deals with its issues. You don't go and tell the Jewish community, let's go map your community so that we can deal with Jewish extremists that have, for example, bombed the offices of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and find out where Jewish extremist cells are in Southern California. You don't go do that to other communities. So all we're talking about is we just want to be treated like anybody else. We don't want to be treated preferentially, and we don't want to be treated as a suspect community. That in itself is the first and most important healthy step to positive cooperation between our community and any authority.
Let me ask Mr. Mike Downing here about one of the statements you made when you were putting out your ideas on how the police might more effectively work with the community. You said that one of the things you said is law enforcement can play the role of educator in the fight against violent ideological extremism. Now, how would you gain the confidence to?
Well, I think in a community policing strategy, that's the idea of what the police are there for, to help inspire people to help protect American values. And in this essence, the more we can do that, we turn the scales a little bit so the community takes on the responsibility of protecting those values and resisting crime, and the police are there for support. That's the way a democratic society should function. And so that's the whole idea, is sometimes police have to take action based on force or fear. It's preferable for the police to take action by inspiring common values and educating people to engage in protecting those values.
I wonder, you were across in Britain for a while, and with Scotland Yard, and Britain's had its own issues with the Muslim community in terms of the radical elements emerging. And I wonder how you'd said in assessing the two countries, you'd said that the Muslim community in the USA, at least Los Angeles, does not share the same risk profile as those in the United Kingdom. What differences did you notice?
I think the strength, as Salam will agree, and we've talked about many times, the strength of the American Muslim communities are that they are American, and they feel American, and they're well integrated, and the quality of life is good, and they're very educated, and they enjoy the freedoms that they have in this country. And we want to make sure that continues. And I've said before, 99.9% of the Muslim people in America are good, law-abiding, hard-working, patriotic Americans. But there are people on our soil, on this land, that don't have those intentions and that want to do harm to good people.
Let me ask Salam Al-Mariyati, what you see now as the main concern the Muslim community has when it comes to dealing with law enforcement. What are the issues you would like to see dealt with now?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the main issue that is important for Muslim Americans is hate crimes. There's so much Islamophobia against our community right now. And that in itself is a root cause of radicalization, isolation, and alienation. It's happening on our campuses. The way Muslim students are being treated, the way they're being viewed with suspicion. I think this is really a widespread problem that our political authorities have not come to terms with. It's a problem when the only engagement that Muslim Americans have is with law enforcement. We need to have engagement with all sectors of American society. Secondly, in terms of counterterrorism, if there is an individual that is going to do harm to our country, the United States, then we will be the first ones to report that criminal activity to the authorities, and that is the way we keep our country safe. Safe from hate and safe from any kind of terrorism.
Now, you were saying how you've worked with Deputy Chief Downing quite a bit, and with his chief as well. How have you found that relationship? In what areas have you found the greatest cooperation?
Well, I think right now what Mike was talking about in terms of the 18 months of dialogue is we've opened the doors, the front doors to law enforcement so that they can come in and break bread with us. There have been Ramadan iftars that Mike and the chief have attended. The sheriff of LA County also attends, and other law enforcement agencies. And right now it's a matter of educating each other, educating the Muslim American community about the role of law enforcement, and educating law enforcement about Islam, because there's still a great level of unfortunate misunderstanding about what Islam is. So right now we're still in the educational phase of really teaching each groups about one another.
I wonder, Mr. Downing, how much you find the issue of U.S. foreign policy interferes with what you try to do at a community level? Because many people say it's not Americans they dislike, sometimes they just get fed up with what they hear about what's happening overseas.
But I think that's what the benefit of local law enforcement has, is that they are the eyes and ears of communities, and they serve communities 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if we could get our precinct commanders and the beat cops to really understand this and understand how important it is to engage communities and solicit the assistance of those communities and inspire a sense of civic responsibility. That's what community policing is in all the various communities we have in Los Angeles. I mean, there are over 200 languages spoken in Los Angeles. It's an amazing, dynamic city, and we want to make sure it's inclusive and that everybody gets to invited to the table to participate in decision making and help resist crime and terror on the streets.
Have you managed, sir, to recruit in, to sort of bring in the Muslim community in terms of recruiting police officers and so on?
We have, with minimal success, but we are trying. We are making outreach. In the dialogues that Salam talked about, we were able to bring in all our 19 precinct commanders, our Muslim officers, and listen to those perspectives, especially from the Muslim officers who were from foreign countries at one time and came to America and were educated and went through the process and to talk about some of the obstacles that they had. And maybe we have an opportunity to look at those to make it easier to integrate more Muslim officers in our department, because I think it's important.
Well, Salam,
I think also, if I could,
go ahead,
if I could just add, yes, if I could just add, I think LA is a great example and model for other cities. I don't think there is that kind of dialogue and engagement in New York or Miami or other police departments throughout the country. And so we hope that we can influence other cities, not be influenced by them, and that we as Americans can influence Europe so they don't have to treat Muslims as separate enclaves, but treat Muslims as a healthy, integrated part of the fabric of their mainstream society,
so,
rather than be influenced by them.
Right. So from what I can see, the dialogue continues. You've got more steps you'll be taking.
I think so,
Yes.
and while some look at this as a crisis, I look at it, and with crisis comes danger, but also brings great opportunity. And I think that we had a great opportunity to have the Muslim leaders of Los Angeles around the table and to talk about how we can now broaden the understanding, deepen the engagement, and focus that engagement.
Deputy Chief Mike Downing, I thank you very much for coming in. Salam al-Mariyati, thank you for joining us from LA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Salam.
And thank you for being with us. On tomorrow's show, we talk with the president of Yale University about the growing trend of exporting education as more and more US universities set up campuses overseas. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.